Okay. And offline, we did talk about that you also do products as well. So what audience is that usually for?
Yeah. So a couple years ago, let's see how many now, maybe about 5 or 6, I noticed that there would be coaching questions that I would throw at my client, and they would explore their own answers, and we would come to this really great point where it sort of might change things moving forward. And I would say, you should steal that question and take it to the next round of one-on-ones with your people next week. And a good example of that is, what did you want to be when you were 8 years old? And so I would have my clients say, oh, I really want to be a marine biologist. And I was drawn to it in these ways. And then I would follow it up with, do you ever feel like a version of a marine biologist today? And often, Christine, they could make a connection like, well, I really loved the research aspect of marine biology. And yes, I am a UX designer now. I do research, right? Something not obvious, but you could see that creatively they would hang with it. So I would say, steal that question. And they were like, I feel kind of awkward, like suddenly walking into a one-on-one and asking this. And I was like, this is so weird. Like, we have a proven solution here and massive opportunities for them to use it. So I created what's called a starter pack, which is a deck of cards. And on each card, there is a question that I have vetted through coaching for sure. Here's a good example. This one for your people to see says, tell me about a time you fundamentally changed your mind about something important. Now, just asking this question means that number one, you're a manager who believes that we can change our mind. Number two, you're curious to know how that might manifest for the person in front of you. And number three, it kind of lays the groundwork for the fact that as you work together in teams and otherwise, we might change our minds. And that's okay. And what would that look like? And how do we now build trust off of that? And I'm not going to call you out for sort of, not sticking to your guns or whatever the expression might be. So it's a great example of something that I felt like in coaching, I had full access to, partially because of my role and my personality. And I really wanted the folks that I was coaching to feel that they too could step towards that in their style of management or whatnot. So the starter pack was really directly a response to something I was observing in coaching. The next iteration of that is a manager pack. So that is the same idea, but for managers of managers. So we might call them more senior leaders. And then last year, yeah, I was hearing like, okay, so in the pandemic, right, towards the end, you have this massive candidate market. People are leaving their jobs, getting double the salary, having many options in front of them. And so obviously in those decisions, they're not going to go to their own manager and say, which job should I take? Because that's totally not what you would do. So I was finding that people were seeking mentors more often, meaning people outside their company, whether further down the career path or coaches, and they weren't exactly sure how to get like, how do you squeeze your mentor for information? That sort of can be awkward, especially if it's non-official or kind of more casual. So anyway, I made a mentor pack, which is also the same idea, which are questions and frameworks. And in that case, it's both for the person being mentored to ask and the person mentoring to ask. And all of it kind of is based on the principle that we all have access to these kind of questions, words to put together in a question, but I swim in it every day. So I'm happy to take that jump, make this product, and for like $38, you can totally change the style of how you're doing this kind of leadership.
I think the very last one that you mentioned is probably the best for my audience, in my
Great.
opinion, because everyone's actually they're on this podcast to learn about their careers, or they're on my
Yes.
YouTube channel to learn about how they can improve their careers. And I keep on saying, like, hey, you can do like informational interviewing. You can go to these mentors.
Exactly.
Maybe not your manager, because that's a little bit weird. But these
Exactly.
mentors, like I've actually gotten calls and emails on LinkedIn and to have calls, and it's always the same basic questions in my opinion. So I'm kind of curious about
No
the
kidding.
questions in this deck that could even push the envelope a little bit further.
Yeah, well, just pulling one out based on what you're saying in the last 10 seconds. Here's one. This is one that a mentor would ask a mentee. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No stupid questions. What are you embarrassed to not yet know, understand, or have experienced?
Mm.
Now, that is a mentor saying, don't worry about it. What's your
Yeah.
most obvious question, right? And so it suggests, of course, the invitation for someone to say whatever's on their mind and gain experience or expertise there. But it also, again, sort of like says, I'm a safe person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not judging you. I'm totally here to help you. I'm on your team. And I think that's the most honest communication that we can have if we're not having like imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
things like that, that we're concerned with conveying a different version than who we actually are. It's going to be way more efficient to be who you are and ask a mentor for something, or having a mentor even ask you something like that. And then the transition of knowledge is effortless.
Mhm. I like the questions you ask because it's not just a question, it has like a deeper meaning as to why it's being asked to reassure the other person that's receiving it.
Yeah. And let's be honest and say in consulting space as well
Mhm.
as mentorship space, there's a lot of like assumption, let's say, that one person has all the wisdom and one person has none of the wisdom.
Yep.
And so we must say, please, consultant, please, mentor, pour it into me. I know nothing, that's bull, that's complete bull. Every person on the planet is creative and has
Mhm.
experiences and can make good choices for themselves. We just sometimes need almost like a third party to kind of hear ourselves closer.
Yep.
And so in mentorship, we are looking for expertise or specifics about things that we haven't yet experienced. But also we can be reminded that we're not nothing. Even if you're
Mhm.
a junior and it's your first job and you're looking for to build experience, even, stuff. You've lived,
Mhm.
20, 22 years, 25 years, whatever it is in the world, and you understand people dynamics already in a way. You're not starting from zero.
Yeah, and I can always recall like the best mentorships that I as me as the mentor are the ones where I still have a relationship with the mentee. And
Yeah.
it's not even related to careers. We like literally message about like, oh,
Yeah.
look, this is where we're going skiing. Oh, I recommend this mountain to go to. Or
Yes.
here's like my cat. Here's some photos.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that is not transactional,
Yeah.
right? And transactional mentorship it's a thing. I mean, and I don't mean to demean it. There are certainly times where you might pay someone for a service to mentor you or consult you and your company in a specific way. But if we are talking about relationships, which is
Mhm.
completely what happens behind every networking conversation and how you get new jobs, I often say that at some point in your career, you will never go to a job board again. You will
Yeah.
get jobs based over lunches, coffees, word of mouth again. So networking feels like a big bad word, and it kind of is a bit cold, but the notion that you make connections with people and maintain those relationships, it's literally the best investment you can make for your whole
Mhm.
career, is to have people that you connect with and then continue to touch base with. And what you're saying is not no work, like it is work to reach out and share the
Yeah.
picture of the skiing and the cat. And yes, of course, it does take a little bit of energy. So it doesn't come for free either.
Yeah. Mhm. Speaking of which, because you brought up layoffs, I was actually kind of curious about this because there's a lot of layoffs nowadays. So naturally, it's going to be
Yes.
on the mind of employees, leaders, managers. So, what exactly is your advice or work with layoffs? Is it on the employee? Is it on the leader? Like exactly what you just said, like the messaging of it, or how to even approach it?
At the beginning of this layoff stuff, so not yet a year ago, but maybe 9 months ago, I
Mhm.
was really irritated because I felt like there were some very large companies with very large brands who started a trend of like, oh, you know what? Pandemic made us go
Mhm.
too aggressively. Now we got to walk it back. I'm not an economist, Christine, so I don't know whether to say that was fully not valid or fully valid. But then I feel like there was an observation I was making that smaller organizations, almost in a way of feeling in the same class of like punching up,
Mhm.
were like, we too also have overextended our hiring practices and have to walk about. It was like peer pressure, right? In a certain way. Now it's all sunk. So I don't really know what the now it's truly every day on LinkedIn. It's kind of a bloodbath. And I'm doing so many reaching out,
Mhm.
so much reaching out to people to say, I saw your post on LinkedIn. What can I keep an eye out for you?
Yeah.
Um, so regardless of kind of the origin story of this round of layoffs, we are where we are, which is that it is a very fragile market right now. And folks who were going to make a decision about moving jobs for maybe better work-life balance, something like that, are certainly pausing that, as honestly I think they should, unless they're in
Mhm.
a situation where it's an abusive workplace or things like that, which completely blast through any recession if you have some
Mhm.
financial security. I believe that the important things to happen in rounds of layoffs is, to your point, leadership messages simply and kindly and carefully, and that employees ask questions when they feel they need to. But a
Mhm.
lot of the folks in my sphere are folks that are in the middle. So they are
Mhm.
not the folks making the call on layoffs, and they are not being laid off, but they have to message it or
Mm.
like hold space for that processing. If there's a climate of, oh God, we might not have jobs, a lower or middle manager is going to have a lot more emotional, almost therapy to do weekly in their
Mhm.
one-on-ones. We're not only talking about shipping stuff, we are talking about how you doing this week? Like, I know you saw the same thing I saw on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, you're okay. And that is a certain shield, and that can be very valid work and feel really fulfilling, I think, to reassure people. But also every once in a while, you're reassuring. Oh shit, we just had layoffs and the people I've been
Mm.
reassuring got laid off. And so that feels
Mm.
really crappy. And I think that's one of the struggles that a lot of folks that I'm coaching right now handle, which is I want to be honest and transparent with my employees. And yet I'm not the person that makes the call on these things.
Yeah.
So I mention it as something that, should the folks listening also be struggling with that, it's not you. It's in the water right now. It's all middle management is going to experience that. You have to be a messenger sometimes in that middle space, which means that you have to pull through messages that you don't necessarily stand behind, and also, feed up, serve up feedback upstream with, hey man, everybody's freaking out. Can you do an all hands? Can you address it? Sometimes you're a voice, an advocate in that way too.
Yeah, everything you just said when Google went through layoffs, I actually had 3 people on my team that got laid off, and
Yeah.
you just basically said everything that happened. Like, the middle
Oh,
management were like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know what was happening." They don't even know
yeah.
why it was being done, how was the selection process even being done in the first place. So they
Yeah.
had all hands where they just basically had like a hearing session or a talking
Mm,
session to focus on the emotions and like what
good.
people thought about it. So I personally felt really well. I wasn't sure there's gonna be another round of layoffs, but I felt
Right.
reassured that at least they cared.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so much to be said for being proactive in the way of
Mhm.
communication. I see this in a whole other area of my world, which is that I'm a parent. And this year, I will just keep it very brief and say that because of COVID, sometimes a teacher gets sick and it ends up impacting your kid's class for the rest of the year.
Mhm.
They need a sub, etc. And it is so much more the smart decision to get ahead of that. And in that example, tell parents and the community,
Yeah.
here's what's going on, here's what we're doing to address it, rather than wait. We know there's subs. We're hearing from 7-year-olds that there's still a sub, hearing from 7 years, still a sub, still a sub.
Mhm.
And then have the parents like, hey, what is going on here? Right.
Yeah.
So that same thing translates to companies too, which is, in all cases, almost be proactive about messaging. If you know that everybody's freaking out right now about getting laid off, even if you're not considering layoffs at the moment, you can say
Mhm.
to everyone, I just want to acknowledge the elephant in the room. I understand any anxiety that might be going on here. And what I can tell you is that for the moment, we look very strong. Should that change, here's what you can expect.
Mm.
And tell them what communication plan would be in place there. People understand if random circumstances come up and you have to make a hard call, but they're
Yeah.
way more likely to stick with you or trust you or work with you again later in their career if they feel that you've been honest and, to the extent that you can be, transparent along the way.
Mhm.
There's really nothing better you can do for sort of future career path opportunities in terms of
Yeah.
hiring someone again than be like that.
Mhm. So what would your advice or your suggestion be for mid-level managers that have like top-down communication that they are told, but they can't tell to the
Mm.
people under them?
It's really hard, right? One of the hardest things about becoming a new manager is if you were previously peers with
Mm.
your people and now you
Yeah.
are managing them, right? It's like, I always say that's like triple black diamond level management. And for a person who probably has never held the role before. So my suggestion in that case is that you need to draw some very specific boundaries, talk about hats, wearing different hats, whatever your metaphor
Mhm.
is, with those folks that used to be friends and you're now managing them. Number one, you should just call the awkward again and say, in your first round of one-on-ones, listen, this is going to be a little weird. Like, we used to be same level. I am now
Hmm.
manager. In a lot of ways, I want to be the same with you. And there will be some cases that I can't be, because either I'll
Yeah.
have access to confidential information, or, I
Yeah.
mean, you're going to get access to things like what people are paid and also how much it costs to run a business. And it's an illuminating growth period, for sure. So to first of all, say to them, this might feel a little weird. But second of all, make friends peer level now. So
Mm.
add to your social community at work by going peer and up, I would say. These are all great foundational community sets, I guess I would say, that when it comes to a point where you might have confidential information, like, hey, we're having a round of layoffs on Friday and 3 of your people are affected,
Yeah.
you don't feel um you don't feel like you're lying.
Mm.
So let's say you find that out on a Monday and the layoffs are coming on a Friday, for
Yeah.
4 days you have that information. You shouldn't go into those meetings by being like, "Hey everybody, next week let's plan a team lunch." I mean, don't be an idiot, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't lie to them, but also there is something, with power comes responsibility, right?
Yeah.
So there are some responsibilities that you have to hold. And I am not necessarily saying that the folks that you would end up laying off then on that Friday won't hold it against you for a while. But ultimately, in their maturity in their career, they will also understand that sometimes that happens. And
Hmm.
it's just part of the ecosystem of an
Hmm.
organization.
Yeah, definitely. And so on the flip side, when should someone leave their job? As
Well, not now. Just kidding. I mean, not really kidding, but I think that generally speaking, I believe that career paths have seasons.
Hmm.
So there will be, stereotypically speaking, early in your career, you might the purpose of your work might be to gain experience. It might be a social life almost. It might be an opportunity to work in a different sphere or maybe live in a different place. And that might be the purpose of work. And then you might go through a new season where the purpose of work is maybe something more stable, like financial. So because you bought a house, or other seasons might require parenting leave, other
Hmm.
priorities, or leave to take care of an ill family member, things like that. So the first question I would ask is, what is the purpose of work in your life right now in this season? If the purpose of work is stability, because you've got a lot of unstable stuff going on outside, you just had twins or one baby even is enough, then you might stay put where you are,
Hmm.
because work is a known quantity and that is what it is serving for you right now. If, however, the season of work you're in is spicy and you're like, what can I learn? Send me on another mission. I'm inventing stuff all over the place. And you feel that that has not been happening at your job for a long time,
Hmm.
then it is no longer fulfilling the purpose of work right now for you.
Hmm.
So I think that question, what is the purpose of work in your life right now? And then is work fulfilling that purpose? Yes or no? That is a great kind of stepping stone towards where you might need to make a decision about staying or not.
That's fascinating because nowadays, like I'm a millennial, or at least I identify myself as a millennial. I'm 1996, like literally at that cusp over there. And everyone, or most people I know in the millennial stage, they're like, let's grind this out so we can
Yeah,
have a better career. And then now I'm looking at the Gen Z, they're like, oh, work-life balance. It's 5 p.m. I'm done. And they're
it's
not
real.
really grinding it out like we were doing in the beginning.
Yes.
So it's really curious to see, like they are not married to their jobs like we were, or at least I
Mhm,
was. I
mhm.
was like, oh well, I've been here this at Accenture. It took a long time to really come to terms like Accenture is just a job or a company. I
Absolutely.
have to prioritize myself and then go somewhere else if I want to.
Yeah.
But back then I was like, oh, I can see myself being here coasting and doing the same job for a long period of time, which
Yep.
is actually like what our older generation has done. Like they just, or at least immigrants, they feel more
Sure.
safe to just stay in the same job because that's what their comfort zone was. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to see when you should leave, when you should not leave. I think you bring a really good point as to like the seasons, because I did not think about that. I got comfortable. So
Hmm.
I was like, oh, I'm just gonna stick to the stability. And
Yeah.
that's what I was focusing on. But at one point that stability ended up becoming stale.
No kidding. That's a great line right there. You should put that in your show notes. Yes, I mean 100%. I have not thought of it in that generational way, but I think you are
Mhm.
correct. And I also want to predict, if it's not already here, that our assumption about what you need to do to become a leader is very much based on millennial and
Yeah.
previous, the culture of that, right? Which is maybe not necessarily married to your work. Certainly you've put in the hours or put in the years, right? Where you were married to work,
Yeah.
but definitely a feeling that you're all in, or you're engaged and that you
Mhm.
care about the work in a way that is more than explicitly 9 to 5, 501, I'm out.
Yeah.
What that generation is going to need to bridge or kind of navigate is the fact that that work-life balance, which I am not saying you shouldn't have work-life balance, like for sure, but that concept and that culture is going to hit walls when it
Mhm.
comes to promotional paths, at least for the midterm, right? Where you've got millennials who are the leaders and
Yep.
beyond, and Gen X that's coming behind, and they don't wear that. What you're going to see is
Mhm.
the folks being promoted and rewarded are the ones that are going to be acting closer to a
Yep.
millennial. That's already happening, right? That's not news. What will be interesting to watch play out is when Gen X gets to be in their 40s and 50s, what has their leadership evolution looked like?
Mm.
And have the folks who wanted to get into leadership needed to adopt that sort of old school mindset, which I'm not even saying is wrong, but like, the previous mindset? Or will there be a completely different expectation of companies and employees and what we owe to the work that we do? It weirdly, and I don't really know a ton about this, but my husband and I were talking yesterday about the future, generally, in a long car ride. And we were talking about jobs that will be going away from AI. And if
Yep.
in our lifetimes there will be a point where manual labor is not a thing anymore, which then suggests maybe at some point a basic income that everyone makes, right? Like, what the hell is going to happen when work has a different shape? Ultimately, I
Mhm.
don't actually know if it'll be in my lifetime, but I think my kids are going to navigate that,
Yeah.
And I don't know what society will look like at that point. And I'm not saying that in a sad way necessarily, a little bit, but I just don't have enough tether to what the impact of that will be on the ecosystem that we're in. And so right now we're all operating under this previous operating system, right? And one that
Mhm.
still is in place. But I don't know how to predict what will happen 20 years from now
Yep.
when Gen X is leading, not only their own startups, but also larger, more significant established brands.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how that shift will happen because right now we have a lot of older people that are leading and they are still going by their own
Yeah.
methodology and even evaluating performance based off of what they think is should be right.
Yes. Not to mention
Yeah.
patriarchal shit, So like I often say, and this happened during the pandemic too. I was really annoyed in the very beginning, although I think I understand why people were saying it, but people were like, "Oh no, women are going to go back in time now in their careers," and I was like, "Or they could start their own thing." There was like no airtime given to the fact that, oh no, women would stay home with their kids for 2+ years,
Yeah.
and now they'll all be washed backwards in their career. For sure, that's valid in many cases. But nobody was ever saying, and what if this other
Mhm.
thing happened? And I feel like, especially in the last couple years, I have almost a little mission in me, which is to
Mhm.
get any woman I know, start your own business, man. Like, we can wait to be promoted to the C-suite, or we can start at the C-suite
Yeah.
by starting your own business. And that assumes a lot of privilege, financial security, ability to take risk, ability, to your point, like an immigrant mindset, ability to sidestep certain mindsets
Mhm.
that may have come from your family or family values. That assumes a lot of those things. Nonetheless, to start a business is not actually that hard. It's the courage to start the business and
Yeah.
the feeling of going upstream in something that would have been way more easy to stay momentum based in your career. And again, the most interesting people I know are the ones that took a hard left when everyone else just kept going
Mhm.
straight. So whether or not you start a business, you should definitely hang out with people who started businesses because there's something interesting going on there.